In 2 hours, a letter will arrive from heaven for your soulmate. You read that line and something inside you stills, as if the universe itself has pressed pause just long enough for your heart to catch up. A letter from heaven. Not from the world, not from circumstance, not from longing or regret, but from a place untouched by human confusion. And you wonder what it would say to the one your soul recognizes even when your hands cannot hold them. The one whose name feels like home in your chest, yet belongs beside someone else's on paper. Because this is not a story about possession. It is not a story about stolen moments or reckless decisions. This is the quiet, burning story of two souls who found each other at the wrong time, and chose integrity over desire. When you think of them, you don't think of chaos. You think of stillness. Of conversations that felt older than language. Of eye contact that carried lifetimes. Of laughter that didn't try too hard. It was never dramatic. It was never loud. It was simply true. And that is what made it dangerous. Because truth, when it arrives in the wrong season, tests the strength of your character more than any temptation ever could. The letter from heaven would not be romantic in the way movies are romantic. It would not tell them to run. It would not encourage breaking vows or shattering promises. Instead, it would speak softly, firmly, like a voice that understands eternity better than impulse. It would say, "You met for a reason, but not every reason is meant for possession. Some connections are meant to awaken you, not to belong to you." And that is the part that hurts. Because when your soulmate is already married, love does not become less real, it becomes more responsible. Every glance must carry restraint. Every message must be measured. Every heartbeat must learn discipline. You do not love them by pulling them away from their commitments. You love them by protecting the life they chose before you appeared. And that kind of love is not weak. It is sacred. The world will never applaud this version of love. No one writes songs about the ones who stayed back. No one celebrates the person who chose distance over disruption. But heaven would. Heaven would write a letter that says, "I saw you when you wanted to hold on but let go instead. I saw you when you could have confessed everything but chose silence to protect others. I saw you when your heart broke quietly, and you still prayed for their happiness." Because this is what integrity looks like when it is wrapped in longing. It is not cold. It is not indifferent. It is warm and trembling and deeply human, but anchored. You did not deny your feelings. You honored them by refusing to let them destroy something innocent. You understood that love is not proven by how tightly you can hold someone, but by how gently you can release them when holding on would cause harm. And somewhere, in those 2 hours before that imaginary letter arrives, you sit with the weight of it all. You remember the first time you realized what this connection was. It wasn't fireworks. It was recognition. It was peace. It was the terrifying realization that if circumstances were different, everything would be different. But they are not. And so you choose the harder path. Not because you don't feel deeply, but because you do. The letter from heaven would not promise reunion. It would not guarantee another lifetime. It would simply affirm that nothing pure is ever wasted. That even if two souls are not meant to walk side by side in this life, the love they awakened in each other still transforms them forever. And maybe that is the real miracle, not ending up together, but becoming better because you met. In the second hour, when the silence grows heavier and the what-ifs try to creep in, you begin to understand something even deeper. Your soulmate was never sent to test your ability to claim love. They were sent to test your ability to protect it. There is a difference. Claiming is easy. Protecting requires sacrifice. And sacrifice is rarely glamorous. It looks like unread messages. It looks like stepping back from conversations that felt like oxygen. It looks like pretending you are stronger than you feel. But the truth is, strength is not the absence of pain. It is choosing what is right while your heart is pleading for what is easy. If heaven truly wrote that letter, it would remind them that vows matter. That promises spoken in sincerity create ripples beyond emotion. It would remind you that loving someone does not give you ownership over their destiny. It would tell you that some soul connections are not designed for partnership, they are designed for awakening. You were meant to show each other what depth feels like. You were meant to remind each other that real love is calm, not chaotic. But you were also meant to choose honor over impulse. And that choice, though invisible to the world, echoes loudly in eternity. You will both move forward. They will continue building their life. You will continue building yours. There will be days when the memory feels distant and manageable. There will be nights when it feels unbearably close. But slowly, gently, you will begin to see that the purpose of this connection was never to disrupt, it was to refine. It taught you that your heart is capable of something profound. It taught you that you can walk away from what you want for the sake of what is right. It taught you that love is not proven in possession, but in restraint. And one day, perhaps years from now, when you look back at this chapter, you will not see tragedy. You will see courage. You will see two people who could have chosen selfishness and instead chose integrity. You will see a love that remained unspoken not because it was weak, but because it was powerful enough to control itself. And maybe the letter from heaven was never meant to arrive physically. Maybe it was written in your conscience all along. Maybe it was that quiet voice inside you that said, "Do not ruin what is not yours to ruin." Maybe it was the peace that followed every time you stepped back instead of stepping forward. Because heaven does not always send letters in envelopes. Sometimes it sends them in clarity. Sometimes it sends them in restraint. Sometimes it sends them in the strength to let go with dignity. And if your soulmate ever feels the same quiet ache, perhaps they too will receive their own version of that letter. One that tells them that the connection was real, but so was their responsibility. One that reassures them that choosing their commitment does not erase what they felt, it simply honors the path they promised to walk. And in that understanding, something shifts. The love becomes lighter. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer demands an outcome. It becomes a blessing instead of a burden. A memory instead of a mission. A quiet gratitude instead of a restless longing. You realize that not every soulmate is meant to stay. Some arrive to show you who you are capable of being. Some arrive to awaken your standards, your depth, your emotional maturity. And some arrive to teach you that the highest form of love is not chasing happiness at the expense of others, it is protecting peace even when your own heart is involved. So if in 2 hours a letter truly arrives from heaven for your soulmate, let it say this: you were loved deeply, but you were also respected deeply. And that respect is what made the love holy. Let it say, nothing pure is ever lost. It simply transforms. And let it remind you that choosing integrity was not losing your soulmate. It was becoming the kind of person worthy of real, lasting love when it arrives in the right time, the right way, and the right season, and maybe, after those 2 hours pass and no physical letter falls from the sky, you begin to understand that heaven was never preparing to interrupt the world, it was preparing to steady your heart. Because the real message was never about reunion. It was about refinement. It was about the kind of love that changes you without claiming you. The kind that walks into your life quietly, rearranges your standards, deepens your emotional capacity, and then steps back, leaving you stronger than it found you. You sit with the weight of that realization and it doesn't feel dramatic anymore. It feels sacred. You think about how easy it would have been to justify crossing lines. How simple it would have been to say, this is fate, and let emotion lead. But fate without integrity is just desire wearing spiritual language. And you refuse to confuse the two. That is what makes this story different. You did not romanticize destruction. You did not glorify chaos. You stood at the edge of something powerful and chose discipline. Not because you didn't love them enough, but because you loved truth more. There were moments, of course, when your heart rebelled. When you wondered why souls recognize each other in the wrong timing. When you questioned why connection does not always align with circumstance. But slowly, painfully, you began to see that timing is not a punishment, it is protection. If something arrives when it cannot stay without hurting others, perhaps its purpose was never permanence. Perhaps its purpose was awakening. Your soulmate did not come into your life to be taken. They came to remind you of what depth feels like. To show you that your heart is not shallow. To prove that you are capable of loving in a way that is patient, respectful, and restrained. That realization changes you. It changes the way you will love in the future. You will no longer settle for half connections. You will no longer entertain shallow attention. Because once you have felt a soul-level recognition, you cannot pretend to be satisfied with surface-level affection. And that is a gift, even if it came wrapped in longing. Somewhere, in their own quiet moments, your soulmate probably feels it too. Not as regret. Not as temptation. But as a gentle awareness that something meaningful passed through their life without breaking it. They will continue honoring their commitments. They will continue building the life they chose. And you will respect that, not with bitterness, but with maturity. Because real love does not compete with vows. It does not ask someone to abandon responsibility. It does not thrive on secrecy. It protects what is sacred, even when it hurts. And that protection is what makes this connection holy instead of harmful. There will be nights when memories surface unexpectedly, a song, a sentence, a shared silence replaying in your mind. But instead of drowning in what-ifs, you will breathe through it. You will remind yourself that not every deep connection is meant to become a destination. Some are meant to be a turning point. You are not walking away empty-handed. You are walking away wiser. You learn that your heart can feel intensely without losing its morals. You learn that desire does not control you, you control it. You learn that love, in its purest form, wants what is right more than what is easy. And one day, when someone enters your life in the right season, free, available, aligned, you will notice the difference. There will be no conflict between emotion and ethics. No shadow of someone else's commitment. No silent guilt. It will be open. Clean. Mutual. And you will recognize it not because it feels stronger, but because it feels peaceful. That peace will be the reward for every time you chose integrity over impulse. For every message you didn't send. For every boundary you quietly maintained. For every moment you stepped back instead of stepping in. Heaven does not ignore sacrifices like that. Even when no one else sees them. Even when the world would have justified a different choice. Your restraint was not weakness. It was spiritual maturity. And maturity is rarely loud. It does not announce itself. It simply stands firm when tested. You were tested, not with something ugly, but with something beautiful that was not yours to keep. And that is the hardest kind of test. Anyone can reject something toxic. It takes strength to release something pure because it belongs in another life. That is what you did. And that is why, when you look back at this chapter years from now, you will not see loss. You will see growth. You will see the moment your heart proved it could love without possession. You will see the season that shaped your character more than any easy romance ever could. And maybe the greatest truth of all is this: soulmates are not always assigned for partnership. Sometimes they are assigned for preparation. Preparation for the love that will stay. Preparation for the commitment that will be fully yours. Preparation for a relationship where integrity does not require distance because timing and circumstance finally align. Until then, you carry this experience not as a wound, but as wisdom. You do not curse the timing. You respect it. You do not resent their marriage. You honor it. Because if you truly love someone, you would never want to be the reason their life fractures. You would rather carry quiet ache than cause loud damage. That is the difference between selfish love and sacred love. Sacred love chooses dignity. And dignity may not give you the person, but it gives you yourself. It allows you to sleep without shame. It allows you to look in the mirror without regret. It allows you to trust your own character. And that trust is priceless. So if heaven ever writes that letter, even if only in your imagination, let it end like this. You were not meant to lose each other. You were meant to prove to yourselves who you truly are. And who you are is someone who can feel deeply without acting recklessly. Someone who can honor connection without violating commitment. Someone who understands that love is not proven by how far you are willing to go, but by what you are willing to protect. The world may never know this story. It will never trend. It will never be celebrated. But in the quiet corners of your conscience, it will remain one of the proudest chapters of your life. Because you loved, and you chose integrity anyway. And that choice, though invisible, is eternal, and as time keeps moving the way it always does, indifferent to human longing yet gentle with human growth, you begin to notice that something inside you has shifted permanently. The ache that once felt sharp now feels like a quiet echo, not because the connection was weak, but because you have grown strong enough to carry it differently. You no longer romanticize what could have been, instead, you respect what was. There is a difference between obsession and honor, and you chose honor. That choice begins to shape the way you see everything. You understand now that love is not measured by proximity. It is measured by purity of intention. And your intention was never to disrupt, never to steal, never to compete. It was simply to feel, to understand, and then to step back when stepping forward would have created cracks in someone else's foundation. That kind of emotional discipline is rare. Most people chase what feels good in the moment and call it destiny. But you learn that destiny does not demand destruction. If something requires you to break vows, hide truths, or live in fragments, it is not destiny, it is desire asking you to ignore your conscience. And you refused. That refusal was not dramatic. It was quiet. It happened in late-night thoughts when you decided not to text. It happened in moments of vulnerability when you swallowed words that could have changed everything. It happened every time you chose silence over selfish confession. Those small decisions built your character brick by brick. No one clapped for you. No one even knew. But heaven did. And more importantly, you did. Over time, you start to see that this connection was never about ownership. It was about revelation. It revealed how deeply you can feel without losing your moral compass. It revealed that you are capable of loving someone and still wanting what is right for them, even if what is right does not include you. That is maturity in its highest form. There is no bitterness in it. No hidden agenda. Just a calm acceptance that some stories are not meant to be rewritten, only respected. You stop asking, "Why did we meet?" and start understanding, "I know why." You met to awaken parts of each other that had been sleeping. You met to remind each other that emotional depth still exists in a world full of distractions. You met to show each other that love can be steady, not chaotic. But you also met to prove that feelings do not override principles. And that lesson will echo in every future relationship you enter. Because when someone comes into your life who is truly available, emotionally and circumstantially, you will not love them recklessly. You will love them wisely. You will bring into that relationship the strength you built in silence. The boundaries you practiced in private. The integrity you protected when no one was watching. And that person, whoever they are, will benefit from a version of you that was refined by restraint. Meanwhile, your soulmate continues their life, unaware perhaps of the full depth of what this connection taught you. Or maybe they know. Maybe in quiet moments they feel gratitude that nothing crossed the line. Maybe they, too, respect the fact that you never tried to pull them away from their commitments. That kind of respect lingers. It does not fade like infatuation. It does not disappear like excitement. It becomes a quiet admiration that lasts without needing contact. And that is enough. You begin to understand that closure is not always a conversation. Sometimes it is a decision. A decision to wish someone well without needing to be part of their future. A decision to carry love as a blessing instead of a burden. A decision to trust that what is meant for you will arrive without requiring someone else's loss. That trust becomes your anchor. The more you lean into it, the lighter your heart feels. You are no longer waiting for another lifetime. You are no longer secretly hoping for circumstances to change. You release that narrative. Not because you stopped caring, but because you care enough to let life unfold without interference. There is power in that release. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is simply steady. You wake up one day and realize you are no longer replaying memories the way you used to. They visit, but they do not stay. They smile at you, and then they leave. And you let them. That is healing. Not forgetting. Not denying. Just accepting. You begin to see your future not as something that was delayed, but as something that is being prepared carefully. Because if you were capable of loving someone that deeply and still choosing integrity, imagine how powerful your love will be when it is fully aligned. Imagine the peace of loving someone who is free to choose you openly. Imagine the joy of building something without secrecy or sacrifice. That future does not feel like compensation. It feels like reward. Not a reward from the world, but from your own character. You prove to yourself that you are not ruled by impulse. You are guided by principle. And that self-trust changes everything. You walk differently when you trust your own heart. You do not fear temptation the same way. You do not panic at strong connections. You know now that you can feel deeply without losing control. That knowledge is freedom. And maybe that was the real purpose of the letter from heaven all along, not to promise reunion, but to confirm growth. To whisper, you passed the test you never asked for. Life will continue to present you with choices. Some will be easier. Some will be harder. But this chapter will remain proof that you can choose what is right even when what is right costs you something. And strangely, what it cost you was not love. It cost you illusion. The illusion that every soulmate must stay. The illusion that every deep connection must turn into partnership. The illusion that timing can be forced. Once those illusions fall away, you are left with something more solid, faith. Faith that what belongs to you will not require compromise of your values. Faith that real love will come in a form that does not conflict with someone else's promise. Faith that you are not behind, not unlucky, not deprived, just being shaped. And shaping takes time. When you finally meet someone whose life is aligned with yours, you will not rush. You will not cling. You will not fear losing them because you will know that what is built on integrity does not need to be hidden. You will love calmly, confidently, cleanly. And you will silently thank this chapter for teaching you how. Because without it, you might have confused intensity with destiny. You might have mistaken temptation for fate. But now you know better. Now you understand that destiny feels peaceful, not pressured. It feels open, not secretive. It feels right in both heart and conscience. And until that day arrives, you are content growing. Content becoming the kind of person who does not just search for a soulmate, but becomes worthy of one. The letter from heaven may never arrive in your hands, but its message is written in your actions. In your restraint. In your dignity. In your quiet courage. And that message will stay with you far longer than any romance ever could. And now, as this becomes the final chapter of something that never officially began, you finally understand that endings do not always come with doors slamming shut. Sometimes they arrive like a soft exhale, like a sunset that does not demand attention yet. Changes the color of everything. This is that kind of ending. Not loud. Not tragic. Not unfinished. Just complete in a way only the heart can understand. You no longer wait for signs. You no longer imagine alternate timelines where circumstances were different. You have gently folded those dreams and placed them where beautiful things belong, somewhere safe, somewhere respected, somewhere untouched by regret. Because what you felt was real. And real things do not need to become permanent to have meaning. That is what you know now. The love you carried was not a mistake. It was not weakness. It was not foolish timing. It was refinement disguised as longing. It was heaven allowing two souls to recognize each other, not to claim each other, but to measure their depth. And you measured yours honestly. You did not run from your feelings, but you did not let them run you either. That balance is rare. Most people either suppress love or surrender to it blindly. You did neither. You stood in the middle of desire and discipline and chose discipline without denying desire. That is strength in its purest form. As you close this chapter, there is no bitterness toward them. No resentment toward their marriage. No anger toward fate. There is only gratitude. Gratitude that you were capable of something so profound. Gratitude that you discovered how deep your emotional world truly is. Gratitude that when tested, your character did not collapse. Because the truth is, you could have chosen differently. You could have justified it. You could have said, if it feels this right, it must be meant to be. But you learned that not everything that feels right is placed in your life to be kept. Some things are placed to be respected from a distance. And respecting distance is its own form of love. That is what makes this the last part, not because the feelings vanished, but because they transformed. They are no longer heavy. They no longer ache with urgency. They sit quietly inside you like a lesson mastered. You do not replay conversations anymore wondering what you should have said. You do not imagine scenarios where you fought harder. Because you were never meant to fight for something that required someone else to lose. And you never wanted to be the reason someone else's foundation cracked. That awareness gives you peace. A deep, grounding peace that feels earned. In the quiet of your own reflection, you realize something even more powerful. You did not lose your soulmate. You met them at a crossroads of growth, and both of you chose honor. That choice means the connection served its highest purpose. It did not have to become a relationship to be sacred. It did not have to become a future to be meaningful. It was enough that it made you better. Enough that it taught you patience. Enough that it strengthened your boundaries. Enough that it showed you the difference between intensity and integrity. And now, when you look ahead, you do so without fear that you missed your only chance at real love. Because real love is not scarce. It does not appear once and vanish forever. What is scarce is readiness. And you are ready now in a way you were not before. Ready to love someone who is fully free. Ready to give your heart without ethical conflict. Ready to build something that does not require secrecy or sacrifice of values. You do not rush that future. You trust it. Because if this experience taught you anything, it is that timing is not your enemy, it is your protector. If something is meant to stay, it will arrive when staying does not cost anyone their peace. That is the standard now. That is the bar your heart refuses to lower. And you are proud of that. Proud that you did not allow loneliness to dictate your decisions. Proud that you did not turn connection into competition. Proud that you walked away with dignity instead of damage. The world may never know this story. It will never trend. It will never be celebrated publicly. But in your private history, it will remain one of the most defining seasons of your life. Not because of romance, but because of restraint. Not because of drama, but because of discipline. Not because you won someone, but because you won over yourself. That is the kind of victory that shapes destiny quietly. And as this truly becomes the last page, you do something simple yet powerful, you release them with sincerity. You wish their marriage stability. You wish their life happiness. Not out of forced maturity, but from a genuine place of growth. Because love that was pure does not turn into poison. It turns into prayer. And you carry no poison. Only wisdom. Only gratitude. Only a steady belief that what is meant for you will never require you to abandon who you are. The imagined letter from heaven does not need to arrive anymore. Its message has already been lived. It was written in every boundary you respected. In every silence you kept. In every step you took backward when your heart wanted to leap forward. And now heaven does not need to send reassurance, because you have become your own reassurance. You trust your heart. You trust your choices. You trust that you did the right thing even when it was the hardest thing. That trust becomes your foundation moving forward. You are not waiting for another version of them. You are not hoping for their life to unravel. You are not clinging to maybe someday. You are standing firmly in, if it's meant, it will come clean. And that clarity feels lighter than longing ever did. This is the last part, not because the memory disappears, but because the story no longer holds you. It shaped you, and now it releases you. You walk forward wiser. Softer, yet stronger. Open, yet discerning. Capable of great love, yet anchored in greater integrity. And when love comes again, and it will, you will welcome it without shadows. Without guilt. Without borrowed promises. Just two free hearts choosing each other openly. Until then, you are at peace. And peace, after everything, is the most beautiful ending of all.